So what I wanted to talk about today is some of this jig fixturing for this built-up wing. It's a little bit different than the foam stuff I've been covering. So first of all, the setup you're looking at here, it's basically a hybrid of many different things I've picked up over time. So back in the day, I don't know if it's still available, they had a magnetic building system to where when you built an airplane, you could lay your wing out on a metal plate and you use these magnets to position all your parts, and it was really ingenious and I loved it. So what I really didn't like about it was the fact that I was already committed to the glass tabletop. But first of all, I want to talk about there's no right or wrong way. There's a straight and a crooked way, I guess you could say, of a wing, but you got to go with a system that works for you. So what I want to do is just present an alternative or something that's working for me. It might not work for you. So what I try to do in this shop is I have a process, and I guess you can define these processes as a tool and a whole. So some of these processes work on certain wings, certain construction techniques. Some of them don't. So just think of the whole setup here in a process like a tool. You go into the hardware store and you'll see 30 different hammers on display. So basically what that's telling me is you need a certain kind of hammer to frame a house, you need a certain kind of hammer to hang a picture, trim carpentry. So the tool has to fit the job you're doing. And it's the same way with these model airplanes. With this jig fixturing thing here, what the neat part about this is it's variable. So you can take all these blocks and the way it's configured, and you can vary it. I mean, you can move these blocks anywhere you want for any size wing, so you're not boxed into a certain fixture that you can't use on any other thing but what you're doing. So that's the nice part about it. It's all variable. So there's a video I made, it was a while back, a talk about it all starts here, and what I was covering in that video was the setup of this glass tabletop. So in order to build a straight wing, you have to have something to gauge it off of. And what I was doing for that, I was utilizing this straight edge. This straight edge you can buy relatively inexpensive. You can spend a lot on them. For modeling, I'd try to stay away from the really expensive ones. It's not necessary. For modeling, the lower grade is fine. And I think this is guaranteed within 1/1000th of an inch over the 48 inches. So this is the machined edge here. This is the part that's super accurate. And I go ahead and all the tools that I use, sanding bars, the bench top, tabletop, I always verify it with this to see how much variance I have. Also the glass tabletop, I can check to make sure that I'm still flat. So this is the first step in the process. Make sure you got a flat building surface, and with a good straight edge, that'll tell you. So once you establish the flat glass, then you're good to go with the rest of the built up. At least you know that you're accurate here. The other thing is on these metal blocks, these are blocks that I got out of a metal supplier. It's called Metal Supermarkets. Let's see, So yeah, it's just called Metal Supermarkets. They're I think there's many of them. There's some in Dayton. There's one here in Indy. And this is cold rolled steel. And these things, I use them as tooling blocks. Obviously, they're not accurate enough to be a tooling block. But what I've done is I've taken the cold rolled steel, which is these dimensions here are all 90, so that's accurate. They're cut off, so they're all different lengths, which doesn't matter to me since I really don't use this as a height gauge. You know, you could if you had them all the same height. But what I'll do is I'll take them over to the belt sander, and you can see the cross hatch here. And I'll just feed them into the belt sander, work them around, and I'll take a machinist square, and I'll go all four directions and make sure they're square. And you can hold the machinist square up there and look and see if you see any light underneath it. And you can tell pretty quick if it's out of square. And cold rolled steel, it's pretty easy to sand into shape, believe it or not, if you have like an 80 grip belt. So another little trick here, by having these at 90 degrees, when I place these blocks up against this tube, the only reason this tube is here is to keep everything in line, so it's all based off the trailing edge. So I'll go through there and place each block up against the tube, which basically sets my 90 degree here, as long as this is against the tube. Another trick, it's really not that useful in modeling, but there's another trick. It's called a 3-4-5. A lot of people with layout on construction sites use it a lot. So let's just say you have 3 foot, 4 foot. When you connect this 3-footer to this 4-footer and it's 5 feet, this will be a 90. It'll be 90 degrees here. So with modeling, you just use a machinist square. But let's just say you're using this method to lay out a garage is 24 by 36 and you want a 90 degree corner. You can go with multiples of 3 foot. So normally it's 3, 4, and 5 feet. If you want a little bit more accuracy, you could go multiples of this. So if you went to 9 feet and 12 feet, and then you come up here, this will be 15. So that's a little trick for determining a 90 degree. You know, gauge blocks are good in machine shops. You have to have them along with a tooling plate. For our modeling, these things are relatively inexpensive or sometimes free if you go to a machine shop and get your scrap. The template material, another thing is when you start building this wing, your table's square and flat. You know, you've got a good working surface here. Now what you have to do is come up with an accurate template. So what I've done here to make these ribs, I've used Formica, which is the same thing I use on a foam wing template. I like it because it's stable, it's relatively thin, and I can get a knife around it relatively easy. And just like all the other foam wing templates, I've actually scribed a center line down this before I cut it. So on this wing, it's all based on this line. So this tabletop, which is glass, I want perfectly parallel to this line. So now to cut these templates out, what I've done, I've utilized some brass tube. I'm not going to cut a whole rib. I don't want to go through too much depth and bore you. Just give you the rundown of sort of how I do it. Come over here and get me some working space here. So this brass tube, it's just K&S brass. I've sharpened it. I've taken just a number 11 X-Acto blade and I've just rotated the tube until I peeled away enough brass to get that sharp edge. Right here you can feel it's pretty sharp. Don't go into too much trouble and think it has to be like a razor blade. Even if it's a little rough, that's okay because it's sort of a sawtooth effect. So just pretend this is the whole rib. What I like to do is take the tube into the corner. Now this tube doesn't have to match this radius of this corner. You just rotate the tube and it'll pull the plug out. I think what I'm going to do eventually here is redo this tube so I have a plunger so I can knock out the plug instead of picking it out. And this is all pretty common stuff. It's like wing building 101, but maybe some of the people don't have the information yet, or they're just starting out. And then I just go through here and connect the dots, connect the holes. So that's how I get a really nice cutout, you know, here. And I do the same back here. It's a brass tube. Now, these spar slots I've got cut in the template. Originally I was going to not do that. I was going to cut these slots after the ribs were stacked. But I decided to put these notches in there. So what I did, I've got my spar material, and I tried to go 3/16, so then I'd come up here while I was filing these notches. I'd actually take a test cut, and then if this test cut fit my material, which was my spar material here, and that's what that's too tight there. So let me cut another one. Sometimes you can vary a little bit by the angle of your blade when you cut. But what you want is a really snug fit. And that's pretty good. See, that's tight enough to hold on to it, but not so tight it won't fit. So that's about the fit I like to have. So what I do when I take all these ribs and I cut them out, I like to stack them up, and then I'll look at them and I'll run a file through there and just barely kiss them all, and I'll make sure that these notches I cut here are in line and they all match. The way these ribs are cut up on these jig blocks, the method of this construction, this is really important right here. So this has to be in line with this. So this is critical right here, and you can see where I cut this notch in line with that center line. So when these ribs sit on the 1/16 inch sheet, which accordingly is sitting on the gauge block, it's in line. So that's important. important. So it's a little bit of work initially, but eventually, once you get to the end and you've got a nice straight wing without a whole lot of fuss on it, clicks together pretty well. A couple of the other things I wanted to talk about. Over here, I'm going to move the camera. I was going to talk about some of these sparse material I had on this this wing. It was over a little bit over 3 feet, so I had to splice some material to get my spar. So this is just a little thing I came up with. It's scrap UHMW here. So this is an old block of UHMW, this long piece. It's got a nice factory cut straight edge on it by probably a CNC machine. And then there's a UHMW block here underneath it. So obviously you could get 48-inch material and you wouldn't have to splice it, but my thinking was as long as the splice was at least right in the center of the wing, or maybe out towards the end, you know, it'd be all right. Center of the wing, you could reinforce it with a plywood doubler. So let's just say I needed to splice 2 pieces together. Okay, I needed to add on to this. What you want to do is you want to stack one over the top of the other and get them lined up. And I just pin them down with my thumb. Now this angle I'm going to cut, it doesn't matter. It can be any angle. You can freehand it, because basically what will happen is it'll mirror image since you're cutting one on top of the other. So I just sort of do like the cooks do with your thumb and the vegetable cutting. Just use your thumb as a guide to start. And I'll come through here and start cutting, and then continue all the way through. So in effect, I've mirror imaged each side here. And it doesn't matter what angle, as long as you stay on the same plane, it'll match up. So what I like to do when you butt 2 sticks like this together, I like to wedge it in this UHMW. Now this is thin CA. This stuff's really aggressive, and you'll see that this UHMW allows you to glue the part in place without it sticking to the board. So you just use your fingers and make sure it lines up, and then you put a little thin CA on it. Go ahead and soak it. You know, don't worry about it, because it's not going to stick to the board. And it'll puddle up underneath. It'll sort of get to the point where it feels like it's sticking, but it's not. So you can see that CA went all the way out. It wicked too much, but I put a little bit too much, but that's all right. So anyway, it kicked off immediately, and now I've got a straight piece of wood. So now there's CA on this UHMW, and the beauty of this stuff is, at least in this I have, it's probably 1/2 inch thick here or more. There's so much surface area, you can actually, you know, clean it. And what I like to do is scrape it. I'll take an older blade that's really not that sharp, and I'll just scrape over the top of it, and it peels off all the CA. And I'll come back here, clean it off, and I'm good to go again. So that's the method I like to use to splice sticks. It's pretty common. It's a secret, but I thought I'd share it with you. Now you can feel a little glue bump there. and I'll sand that off. Now this is pretty aggressive. I think this is 80 grit, 60 or 80. It's mostly used for cabinet building. These little jigs, this is scrap plywood, this is 1/4-inch ply. And one of these times when I'm out there on the chop saw, if I remember, I'll get a bunch of scrap and I'll just start slicing up little blocks. I got 45-degree here. This angle doesn't matter, it's just a matter of having a point on a sanding block to get in a tight spot. You can wrap the sandpaper over so you have a 90. So I like to make these. Here's one, just a simple flat block. Now see, that's not very aggressive. And this will change the shape pretty quick. Get that glue bump off. Try not to over sand. But anyway, there's a seam. It's really strong. It's straight. You don't want seams everywhere, obviously, for strength reasons, but there's some places you can live with them. So that's my method with UHMW. The other thing I do when I actually start cutting ribs out, I like to actually cut the ribs on this material. Here's a scrap. So you can put a center line down your material to go through here. Now if you didn't want to, if you got a really good sharp knife and you really don't want to do the brass thing, you could probably go through there. I always had trouble trying to get through a corner. So anyway, I brass the corners. This here, I cut. Pull that out. So you can see, relatively speaking, how quick it is to cut a rib out. Like I said, I go back and cut the inside of these pieces out after the fact. Like here with the brass. Now, one of the things I think I'm going to do with this wing, since I like the look of the I-beam, I'm not sure yet, but what I'm going to probably do, I'm going to come in here with this and cut some half ribs. And I think I want the I-beam look. I always love the leading edge I-beam look. So what I'll do, I'll extend this up, and then I'll come in here and slice this out. So in effect, I've created a half rib. Now this half rib, this isn't the right material. This is like 1/20th, but this half rib I think would look cool once this other spar's on top. Let's just say, stick this in here real quick. This is the look I'm going to go for right here, like that. Or you could even put 3. You can make it look really cool, like the I-beam effect. You could come in here and do 3 across. The other thing is probably not obvious here, but you know, you got this spar top and bottom. I'm not sure how I'm going to do it yet, but what I'm thinking of doing is coming back with more material here, probably the 3/16, and I'll come in here and actually splice something in here diagonal. So I might go from here to here and a Warren truss back and forth. Now, once it's all glued together in this fixture, I go back before the wing is taken out of the fixture. The trailing edge will be added to it. So I'll come back here. I'll remove these little magnets. Probably keep the magnet here on the side. Like I said, this is just a mock-up just for the video here. I haven't glued anything. I'll put another magnet there, and then I'll come back for the trailing edge, and I'll place that, make sure everything's square and tight, and I'll come back and glue this trailing edge on. And I'll probably do it from the bottom too. So before it comes off the glass, I'll do the worn truss, and then I'll do the trailing edge. Now the trailing edge is sitting above the rib 1/16 of an inch, which is what I want. I don't want the trailing edge sunk down in there into the rib to be flush, because what I'm going to do, and probably before it comes off the glass, is actually put little cap strips, not much, but just cap strips. So if you've ever run a cap strip over a rib, it's amazing how much more rigidity you can get out of that rib. You get rid of a lot of this. And this is 1/16 inch rib, and really it's pretty small for a painted finish. I know you want a little bit more surface up here. So I'll run cap strips up to the trailing edge, and I might run them all the way out like that. And then this spar here I might just leave below the cap strip. I'm not sure yet, but or you could cap that too, it doesn't matter. But that's what the basically thought process is over this whole wing. It's still based off the glass. Get to the center section. I'll have two of these ribs a little bit closer probably. I'm still working on the layout. Some of the ribs here will have sheeting all the way across, and that will form the strength in the center section. The other thing, maybe before the sheeting goes on, I can put little plywood doublers in there. Just beef up a little bit in the center, I don't know. So that's pretty much it. That's what I had written down that I wanted to cover, so I didn't want to spend too long, and I didn't want to actually go through a building video. I just wanted to walk you through and show you the thought process behind these blocks. So that's it for now. Maybe eventually I'll put more videos together to where they're edited a little bit quicker. But I tried to keep it to where it didn't drag on too much, so you got a lot of information really quick, and that way you can get the information and I can convey the message of what I wanted to talk about. So thanks for coming by and watching, and like, subscribe, and share. Send this video on to somebody you think might like it. It's model airplane related. This can be a control line wing, or this could be a RC wing. It's just a wing. So these building techniques are here. They're, you know, for anybody that wants to build a wing. Thanks a lot, and I'll talk to you guys later.